What's up, everyone? So I was watching SportsCenter on ESPN this morning, and they had this really concerning segment breaking down some bad 49ers injury news that represents a big development for San Francisco moving forward. But there was also a fascinating discussion about whether the Niners discovered something pretty meaningful on Sunday Night Football that could change their offensive identity going forward. The panel was diving deep into both of these critical storylines. Bad news for the Niners was revealed late last night, according to the SportsCenter crew, and this deserves extensive discussion because of the major implications it has for this football team heading into a crucial stretch. Bryce Huff injured his hamstring against the Atlanta Falcons in Sunday night's victory. The analysts aren't sure how this is even possible, but somehow for the 49ers, who obviously have dealt with so many injuries over the years across multiple seasons, they always seem to have these players who play in games, play exceptionally well in games, sometimes absolutely dominate in games, finish games appearing completely fine, and then, the very next day, Kyle Shanahan takes to the podium for his press conference and announces that player who starred and played really well is now going to be out for a couple of weeks. All right, everybody, listen up for just a second. Before we break down this insane 49ers situation, I need your help with something super simple that makes a massive impact. See that like button? That's basically your vote saying, yeah, I want more of this content. And here's the thing, YouTube's algorithm lives and dies by those likes. The more likes this gets, the more 49ers fans get to see this breakdown, the bigger this community grows. So do me a solid right now. Hit that like button before we go any further. One click, 1 second, but it genuinely keeps this whole thing going. Bryce Huff absolutely dominated the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday night. He was a critical part of a Niners defense that generated 22 total pressures on quarterback Michael Penix Jr. Huff helped to completely change the complexion of that game defensively. Bryce Huff has been a game-changing player for the 49ers all season long since reuniting with defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. Now, Huff has a hamstring injury, and he's going to be out for a couple of weeks minimum, according to the medical timeline. For a quick-twitch explosive player like Huff, you always hate to hear about these soft tissue injuries because they can linger for extended periods. With hamstring injuries specifically, you never know how long it's going to bother a player and affect their explosiveness. Right now, looking at the depth chart, the 49ers only have these healthy defensive ends on their roster, counting both the 53-man roster and practice squad. Leonard Floyd, Sam Okwuegbunam, Yetur Gross-Matos, and a few practice squad bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, the SportsCenter panel emphasized the 49ers are in a genuinely difficult spot right now. They're already without Nick Bosa, who's one of the best defensive players in football. They're without All-Pro linebacker Fred Warner. Now, they're also without Bryce Huff, who's been having a breakout season. At some point, the analysts know Robert Saleh has done an absolutely great job scheming around these injuries, but at what point does it become too much to overcome? The panel thinks the 49ers legitimately need to make a trade. They might need to rush to make an aggressive move this week before the deadline. And if San Francisco is forced to rush that transaction and overpay slightly, then so be it. If they have to give up more draft capital to get a quality pass rusher sooner because they desperately need body, and the analysts aren't talking about some fringe roster player, they need a legitimate quality contributor, then General Manager John Lynch has to pull that trigger. Because it's one thing to survive and compete without Nick Bosa and Fred Warner when you're getting production elsewhere, but now you're also down Bryce Huff, who this year, as many predicted, is having an absolute breakout season with San Francisco after reuniting with Robert Saleh. Looking at Huff's statistical production, his overall PFF grade is 82.3, which is excellent. His pass rush grade is 81.4, and his run defense grade is 65.7. He's accumulated 19 total pressures on 135 pass rush snaps this season, along with 15 hurries, 4 sacks, and 9 run stops. It was so impressive to see the collective defensive effort from the Niners against Atlanta on Sunday night, where San Francisco generated those 22 pressures and 2 sacks as a complete unit. Now, once again, Just like the panel was discussing after the initial injuries to Bosa and Warner, other players on this defensive line are going to have to play out of their minds and step up significantly. Against Atlanta, Sam Okwayanonu had 5 pressures and 1 sack. Bryce Huff had 5 pressures and 1 sack before getting hurt. Rookie defensive tackle Kalia Davis had 3 pressures. Other contributors like Jordan Elliott and Maliek Collins each had 2 pressures. Dre Greenlaw, Charvarius Ward, and Leonard Floyd all recorded 1 pressure each. This upcoming game on Sunday, the Niners are going to be facing the Houston Texans. San Francisco is now road favorites after the Texans' ugly loss on Monday night against the Seattle Seahawks. Without Bryce Huff, it really stinks for the 49ers because this Texans offensive line has been genuinely terrible protecting the quarterback. Huff would have had another golden opportunity to feast against Houston's pass protection. Hopefully, the rest of the defensive line can generate pressure, but obviously, being down another really important body makes that significantly more difficult. Now, let's talk about the 49ers offensive line because there's an interesting development there. Matt Hennessy replaced Jake Brendel at center on Sunday night, and the Sports Center crew wanted to give credit where credit is due. Jake Brendel actually played pretty well before he injured his hamstring against the Falcons and had to leave the game. But the question the panel raised is, could this actually be an addition by subtraction situation? Because everyone knows who Jake Brendel is at this point in his career. He's been a journeyman center, and he's an average player who isn't particularly strong at the anchor point. Brendel can get pushed around and bullied by stronger interior defensive linemen. While Brendel did play better against Atlanta before the injury, Matt Hennessy replaced him, and it gave the Niners some legitimate juice at the center position, with added athleticism. Matt Hennessy isn't some scrub backup. He played his college football at Temple University and was a third-round draft pick by the Atlanta Falcons. It didn't necessarily work out for him in Atlanta primarily because of injuries, but when Hennessy was on the field healthy, he played pretty well. Hennessy had a couple of really impressive reps against an Atlanta defense, which, by the way, has a much improved defensive line this season and ranks as one of the better statistical defenses in the NFL. Matt Hennessy passed the test against his former team. Maybe the Niners found something significant here, with Hennessy being a legitimate upgrade over Jake Brendel going forward. Looking at Hennessy's performance, 20 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks allowed, only 1 pressure allowed, 0 quarterback hits given up, a 97.5 pass block efficiency rating, a 79.2 pass blocking grade, and a 64.1 run blocking grade. The panel is genuinely excited to see what Matt Hennessy can do at center for the Niners moving forward in this offense. Then there's Dominic Pooney, who all season has been struggling and playing below expectation. Against Tampa Bay, it got to a point where he became a borderline benchable player given his performance. Pooney desperately needed a bounce-back game both mentally and physically against Atlanta, and he absolutely did bounce back. Against the Buccaneers, Vita Vea completely dominated him. Pooney gave up 6 pressures and 6 hurries in that game, which is unacceptable. He was so much better against Atlanta's defensive front. What the Niners coaching staff did differently was manage Pooney's knee injury that he suffered during the preseason more carefully during the week as far as his practice schedule and workload. If that modified practice schedule is what it takes for Pooney to be properly ready for game day, the team has to continue doing exactly that because the Niners badly need him to play at a higher level consistently. Pooney was genuinely awesome as a rookie last season. The significant decline in year 2 has been surprising to everyone. This could have something to do with playing through the knee injury, but if that is truly the case, and it's injury-related affecting his performance, maybe the coaching staff should let him sit and fully recover because the panel was impressed with what Pooney did against that legitimately good Atlanta front 7. Now, here's the most fascinating part of the Sports Center segment. Did the Niners discover something meaningful with their offensive approach on Sunday Night Football? This is something that may have been initially tested out and in the developmental works the previous week against Tampa Bay, but it didn't yield significant results in that game. What changed is the 49ers dramatically decreased the amount of zone running plays that Kyle Shanahan typically calls in his scheme. In weeks 1 through 5 of the season, the Niners ran their patented outside zone scheme 61.2% of the time, which is Shanahan's bread and butter. But in the last 2 games against Tampa Bay and Atlanta, you can see how much that percentage has decreased significantly. The zone running plays went way down from 61.2% to just 42.6% of their rushing attempts. What everyone noticed when watching the game on Sunday night was how physical and bruising the Niners' ground game suddenly looked, how quickly Christian McCaffrey was able to get upfield and run in a decisive north-south direction. That schematic change from Kyle Shanahan, and he absolutely deserves credit for this adaptation and adjustment, is that Shanahan called significantly more power and gap scheme runs instead of his traditional outside zone. When the Niners ran power concepts against Atlanta, San Francisco averaged an outstanding 7.1 yards per carry on 9 total attempts, according to the statistical breakdown. All season long, this Niners ground game has been one of the absolute worst rushing attacks in football. San Francisco ranked 32nd in yards per carry and 30th in rushing yards per game going into Sunday night. That's genuinely shocking for a Kyle Shanahan offense, when he's always been able to hang his hat on the run game and innovative run scheme. How often have we seen this Niners team on offense be able to dominate opponents and wear down the opposition by finding consistent success on the ground? To start this year, it's been a major mystery. Why can't the Niners run the ball effectively? The panel personally thinks it's primarily because of offensive line performance and execution. Last week, there was extensive discussion about this huge statistical disparity. Christian McCaffrey's yards before contact this year, compared to 2023, are down drastically. That's because the interior of the 49ers' offensive line was getting pushed around in pass protection. They were not winning their one-on-one matchups consistently. They were not holding up well in run-blocking situations. But when you run more power and gap schemes, the analysts think it tapped into the natural physicality of this Niners offensive line and played to their strengths. For Christian McCaffrey specifically, instead of having to display patience waiting for outside zone to develop, he was able to see the hole immediately, hit the hole decisively, and get north and south running downhill. This is so important for this Niners offense as a complete unit and for opening up the passing game. If this 49ers offense can become more balanced between run and pass, they become exponentially more difficult to defend for opposing coordinators. Prior to the Atlanta game, Brock Purdy was averaging more than 300 yards passing per game, which led the entire NFL. He still leads the league in passing yards per game, but there was absolutely no balance to this offense whatsoever, and the Niners had become completely predictable. Defenses knew San Francisco was going to throw the ball most likely, and they knew the 49ers weren't going to find much success on the ground with chunk plays. Purdy was throwing it quickly out of necessity. But when you start to establish the ground game consistently, it naturally opens up the passing game significantly. It makes the quarterback's job so much easier. Then it also opens up play-action opportunities, which is when Shanahan's offense is at its absolute best. Hopefully, this is something that continues in this positive direction moving forward. So that was the full Sports Center breakdown of the bad injury news with Bryce Huff being out weeks, but also the encouraging offensive discovery that the 49ers may have found their rushing identity by running more power concepts instead of outside zone.